Good afternoon and welcome to the hardest game after something of a sabbatical from these live broadcasts. My name is Ben Doughty, in case you've forgotten, and I'm delighted to be joined right now by my old mate and boxing stalwart, really, of many years on the scene, has been behind the scenes in a lot of situations. Spud Woollatt, welcome.
Hello, Ben. Hello, viewers. Nice to see you. Nice to speak about boxing. Just wish it was more positive things to talk about.
Indeed. The other thing I'm not sure of, I'll apologise to the viewers in advance, is because I think this is a different StreamYard setup I'm using here. I don't know where I can access your comments or if I can see them as yet, but I'll figure that out as we go. What's more important is that we continue the flow of this broadcast. Spud contacted me yesterday, and he said that he would dearly like to do something for his late friend Ricky Hatton. Spud, I know you worked with Ricky back in the day, and I know particularly you worked with him for three unforgettable fights, one in Sheffield and two in Las Vegas. They were the Carlos Mauser, Juan Urango, and Jose Luis Castillo fights. But I do imagine that your relationship with Ricky Hatton actually predated those fights, I would imagine.
I'll be honest with you, Ben. Not a great deal. I I got introduced to Ricky as late as the weigh-in for Carlos Mauser,
Oh,
and
really?
then Dennis Hobson, who I love to bits, introduced me to Ricky, and basically said, "This is Spud. He's going to look after your every need. Use and abuse him."
Yeah.
And that's exactly what Ricky did. God bless him. He was fantastic to me. I honestly, truly cannot speak more highly of a boxer than Ricky Hatton. And it, his passing is so sad. And boxing is going to be hideously the poorer for Ricky's passing. He was just a fantastic bloke.
I remember you mentioned on Facebook within the last couple of days that first fight with Mauser, Carlos Mauser, which was it was his first defence of what was really the light welterweight championship of the world. It was technically it was the IBF title, but he beat Kostya. He was the genuine world champion at 10 stone, and Carlos Mauser was his first defence. And you said that he invited your son up to the room. I think you said for a Chinese after the weigh-in. Is
Yeah,
that correct?
yeah. Typical Ricky. That
Yeah.
we had the weigh in, and then Ricky said to me, "Spud, I want to go to my room. Let's go." And of course, as we were going up to the room, he invited Ginge, my son, and we had a chinky, and it's the biggest chinky order that I'd seen in my life. It had every possible conceivable item on the menu,
Yeah.
and invited me and Ginge to tuck in. Now, some viewers may say, "So what?" But that showed me the magnitude of the man. Here he was the night before his fight with Carlos Mauser, and with such pressure on his shoulders after the Costa Zoo win to do well, he was inviting good old Spud and his son up to his room.
Yeah.
And what was even more amusing about it is my son couldn't help himself and picked up a program that was not on the bed and started looking at it because he felt a bit awkward and the conversation wasn't flowing as much. And so Ricky snatched the program off him and signed it for him and said, "There you go."
Yeah.
And then, to my horror, Ginge picked up a bag of boxing gloves, and Ricky said, "I don't. I suppose you think I'm going to sign them, do you?" And Ginge said, "No." He was terribly embarrassed, but good old Ricky signed the programs and signed some paintings that had been done for Ricky, and gave them all to Ginge.
And
And he
also, I believe that he mentioned that Ricky had a box at Man City, rather cheekily, you said, and he said, "Well, I tell you what." What did he say?
yeah, Ricky said, Ginge, who do you support? And Ginge said, Newcastle. And I said, oh, Ricky, he's absolutely nuts over Newcastle. He'd travel anywhere. And then Ginge, being the cocky so-and-so that he was, turned around and said, Ricky, I bet you Newcastle hammer you the next time they play. And Ricky said, you can come to my box
Find out.
and find out.
Yeah.
And he was just a complete and utter gentleman. And the one thing I took from my role, I checked with Dennis Hobson today. I said, Dennis, what was my role? Because most people who don't like me just said it was bog cleaner
A gopher,
or
they'd say, yeah, or something like that.
gopher, yeah.
Yeah.
What was my role? And he says, you were my events manager. I said, thank you very much for that, Dennis. I'll use that on the podcast I'm going on later on today.
Yeah.
And I just thoroughly enjoyed myself. Seriously, Ben, it sounds as if I'm gushing over Ricky, but you couldn't meet a better bloke.
Well, indeed. And by the way, can I say, when you talk about gushing, Spud, I'd just like to say, without patronising you, how marvellously well you're articulating yourself. And I think I would like to explain to the viewers, Spud, for those who don't know Spud, and most of us in boxing, we do know him, but Spud was afflicted with Parkinson's a little while ago now, and he's fighting the effects of that. And that's why sometimes, like all sufferers, there are good days and bad days. And I just wanted to say, I wanted to explain that, and also to say that you're talking very wonderfully, clearly, and I don't want to patronise that say, Spud, but you're on good form, mate, and I'm really grateful to have you here today.
Yeah, I'm grateful because I think you're providing a really excellent service to boxing, and that's why I wanted to come on to say my piece.
Brilliant. I appreciate. Yeah. Before we talk about the many other things relating to Ricky and his fantastic career and his huge legacy, I want to talk to you about the Chinese takeaway, if I may, because I believe Kerry Kays, who's a wonderful nutritionist and a very knowledgeable guy, who oversaw Ricky's strength and conditioning program and his nutrition for big fights. He said he hated some of the things Ricky would do after the weigh-in. He said, but it wasn't worth the battle, like the fry-up he'd have on the morning of a fight at his local cafe if the fight was in Manchester.
Oh,
And Kerry Kays would be like saying, I hate seeing him have these Chinese takeaways or fry-ups after he's made the weight. But that was just the way he was, wasn't it?
yeah, I'll be honest with you, Ben. One of the things that Ricky said when we ordered the chinky, and Paul Speak was with us, Ricky's personal assistant and events coordinator as well, and he said, Ricky basically said to me, Spud, whatever you do not tell Kerry. I said, I won't. And it went on from there. It sounds as if we hid things from the team, but the team was so close, and I've never what's the word I'm looking for? I never grew tired of the humour
Yeah.
and the laughs we had. And there's a number of stories I'll tell a little bit later, very quick ones that'll bring a smile to
I,
your
I told
viewer's
the
face.
when I wrote a little tribute for him the other day, one thing I recited again was I saw him at a press conference when he was with Nathan Gorman in 2017. Gorman was fighting someone. It wasn't Dubois, but it was Brie Dubois. And as I walked into the BT Sports Hub, I saw him standing there. And obviously, I'm a bit of a kind of social media whore, getting the pictures with the great and good. And I said, Ricky, any chance I could trouble you for a quick picture? And I said, oh, we did have one another, previously a couple of years ago, but it was a really bad photo. And he looked at me and went, well, if you're in it, what do you fucking expect? But he still posed for the picture. But he may not have even been joking. That may have been absolutely sincere. He may have just said, "Why? How could you ever expect to get any kind of good aesthetic, with your particular aesthetic?" But no, I mean, he grew up in a pub. It's well documented where there was a lot of that banter and one-liners, and that's why you get the stuff about his dad saying, "I'm not saying he's short, but he's got a full length passport photograph and all." But it was endless, I believe. I mean, I didn't know him like you did, so but I imagine people tell me he really was like that, and that was what you got.
I saw the same question on an interview, someone discussing Ricky's passing, and it was exactly the same joke as I said to Ricky once, and that was, Ricky, UFC, are you ever going to fight in the octagon?
Oh yeah,
And Ricky said, nah, I prefer KFC.
yeah,
And it just made me roar with laughter. He was constantly going out of his way to keep his team happy, and he was generous to a fault.
yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, it's times like this when, if you're a member of the team or you're you pronounce that you're a really good fan of Ricky, that you say to yourself, could I have done more?
Well, here's the
And
thing. I just saw an article in the. Listen, Spud. We should say it right now while treading respectfully, carefully. All the narrative since the tragic death has been, it just goes to show, mental health struggles are real, and checking on your friends, and if only you're going to talk to somebody. Now, nobody's saying the cause of death, and I mean, I know you will have heard things, and so have I, but until there's more details in the public domain, I wouldn't expand upon that at all.
I'll
But
be honest,
everybody is treading around the issue, Spud, as if to say that it wasn't by any kind of, like natural, it wasn't natural causes as such, you know what I mean, and it wasn't anything like a heart attack, all the rest of it. Now, I don't know about that, but here's what I think. I saw an article in the Daily Mail, which annoyingly I couldn't read, but I saw the headline, when it said about boxing's, what was it saying, boxing's worst kept secret, or but boxing's consistent problem where it doesn't look after its heroes, and they cited Bruno and Tyson Fury instead. Yeah, sorry, not instead, as well, in terms of those mental health struggles and the demons that fighters, high profile fighters, have been known to have had. Now, where Ricky was concerned, I suspect sometimes he might have been surrounded by a few affable enablers who were perhaps quite unwitting that they were enabling things. When they talk about the benders and the drinking, at one
yeah,
point he said that he said he had several suicide attempts. He admitted to that, and he said at one point, I realised I obviously wasn't making a success of those, so I thought, all right, I'll just drink myself to death, and the drugs and all of that. And the trouble is, when somebody is damaging themselves in that way, sometimes you're surrounded by people who who say, you can let your hair down, Ricky lad. Never mind what the tabloids are saying. So you fell on your ass in a club in Tenerife. It don't matter. Whereas I personally believe it probably did matter, and that perhaps some people who were around him didn't realise the extent of those behaviours. You know what I mean? And realise that an intervention might have been a really good idea.
I'll be honest with you, Ben. I've got it on good authority what happened
Yes.
on the time Ricky was found, and
Yes.
I'm not going to repeat it. And it
No.
sounds as if I'm dangling a carrot or some hideous statement like that, but I do know on good authority how Ricky passed, and it just makes all of the events even more tragic and so sad. I do know that on numerous occasions, as with all mental health, various members of Ricky's family, various members of Ricky's closest friends used to be with Ricky to keep an eye on him.
Yeah.
And so he had somebody familiar with him to look after him. And one thing's for certain is, in the past, Ricky's had far lower moments than
Yeah.
in recent times. And I suppose if there's one thing you could fault people for, is when Ricky announced that he was having a fight with this whatever geezer it was in the
Dubai.
Arab Emirates. That's great. Ricky's fine for a few weeks. You know, he'd be in training. He'd be happy.
Yeah, yeah,
And perhaps, and only perhaps, if I had one slight criticism, and I'm pleading with people not to take me the wrong way, is they took the foot off the gas with regards to looking after Ricky and following him around. But Ricky was a man, you've already alluded to it, Ben. Ricky was a man of his own being, sort of thing.
yeah,
And the one thing that did happen in those 3 fights that I worked with him, I was on his case that much, following him around that much, that he said, Spud, will you piss off? Leave me alone. And he didn't mean it nastily. And he called me on his phone and said, I'm sorry about that. I said, Ricky, you've got absolutely nothing to be sorry about. But I've been asked by Dennis Hobson, who a lot of the readers will know was the Sheffield-based promoter, who was also fantastic with Ricky. I just said to Ricky, look, Dennis has told me to follow you everywhere in
yeah,
case something happens. Now, one thing for certain that's changed from when I looked after Ricky Hatton is the amount of security that's at events nowadays.
yeah,
And I always remember when on the Carlos Mauser fight, there was a security firm employed, but they weren't well known. And I will argue that perhaps they didn't do a good as job as the security do nowadays.
yeah,
And that's another reason why I kept on Ricky all the time. I'm no security man. You know, you blow at me and I fall over. So I never claimed to be a security man,
yeah,
but I've had some excellent pictures and photos taken of me walking well-known boxers to the ring. So it
yeah,
was a bit of a boost to my ego. But with that said, after the Mauser fight, I said to Dennis, I'm not big enough and I don't have the presence to ward people off that are annoying if they're going to annoy Ricky. And we need to get security on our events. It
yeah,
changed. It changed a little bit for the Urango fight,
yeah.
but it was still nowhere near enough, and it
A
was
bit threadbare.
still the same people.
Yeah.
That one, if Ricky Hatton fought in today's climate, he'd have had a lot more security around him.
I'd just like to, because I can see the comments, I'd like to read a couple of comments from some of the viewers. Kung Kao says Ricky was monastic in his training, but he would rebound hard between fights and go on binges. I mean, that's something that's well known. And an account called Chinwag Spurs says he deserves a statue in Manchester, without a doubt.
Completely agree.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that he would. The likelihood is he will get one. I would think. I mean, the same way Joe Fraser has one in Philadelphia and Rocky Marciano has one in Brockton, Massachusetts, and so on. You know.
I know your readers are extremely knowledgeable, Ben, as you are about the sport. So I won't begin to try and test you about the best British boxer to come out of our country. But what I'll say is, without fear of contradiction, in my opinion, Ricky Hatton was the most popular boxer, and that
He really was.
includes
Bruno,
Henry Cooper, includes
Henry
Frank
Cooper.
Bruno, Nigel Benn, and
And I
I
think
just
the
think
interesting thing is he was the first mainstream crossover star in this country from boxing who came up in the satellite TV. So basically, he garnered that popularity without the help of terrestrial television because he was on Sky TV from the off. He didn't have BBC or ITV like guys like Barry McGuigan and Frank Bruno and previously Henry Cooper had. Do you know what I mean? So And I think the thing, we always measure Ricky's support by the absolute hordes of people he was able to take across the pond with him for the things like the Mayweather and Pacquiao fights, and some of the other fights that you were
That
involved
wasn't
with.
cheap, Ben. That wasn't cheap for them to go to Las Vegas. Many people that I know took bank loans out.
Yeah, and some of them didn't know they could get a ticket when they got there, by the way, Spud. And in the worst ways, they were going to watch it in a bar and be part of the whole occasion, right?
That's why Las Vegas ran out of beer.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I I always remember, just going back to the security, one of the biggest laughs I had with Ricky was after he won the Urango fight. I said, "Follow me, Ricky." And lo and behold, Ray Hatton was close by. And we tried to get back to the changing room. And basically, the crowds were that massive. I couldn't, we struggled to get Ricky back.
yeah,
And this security guard said to me, "Where are you going? What are you doing?" I said, "This is Ricky Hatton. Have you not watched the fight? We're going back to his changing room." And the security guard got hold of Ray Hatton and was forcibly stopping him from going where we were going back to the changing room. So there's no word of a lie. I chinned the security guard,
oh yeah,
and that gave us enough room to rush Ricky through. But like a dickhead, I went in the changing room and I said to Ricky, "Did you see that security guard I chinned?"
yeah,
He said, "Spud, you dickhead. That was Las Vegas police."
oh yeah,
So I shit myself, went straight back out, and Ricky knew what I was doing and said, "Offer him 2 tickets not to arrest you from my next fight."
yeah,
And lo and behold, we offered this security guard, who was Las Vegas police, 2 ringside seats. I'm friends with him, the security guard. I've seen him a couple of times. Sorry, the police guy. It was just unbelievable.
yeah. Well, you had a touch there for sure, Spud. Concau said I was in Las Vegas with Americans at their place and asked why the UK fans were booing the US national anthem. I mean, unfortunately, that is something that we do have this very kind of Brits on the piss kind of culture and reputation, especially abroad. There's a
I
certain
can't
amount of
stand it.
no,
I
I don't
can't
like it
stand
either.
it.
But I mean, what are you going to do? You said that when by the time of the Wanyurango fight, and that was with Wanyurango, I believe it was a question of him regaining the IBF light welterweight title, having been up to and beat Luis Colazo for the WBA welterweight title,
He was always
and
going to step up.
Urango was a damn strong man. Uruguayan,
Mightily
I believe he
strong.
was. He was one strong. Oh, Dominican Republic when Urango, but he
Yeah.
was a strong son of a bitch, and Ricky had to box him somewhat. But you said when you were around in Las Vegas for that fight, you said Golden Boy were very much hovering around Ricky Hatton, knowing that his deal with Dennis Hobson was going to run to a close. I think after the Jose Luis Castillo fight was the last one with Dennis, and then they were looking to get their piece of the action after that. You remember that?
Yeah, I remember distinctly. Um, I've forgotten his name now, but he's one of the top guys in Golden Boy.
Eric Gomez?
No,
No.
he
Okay.
was brother-in-law to Barrera,
Okay. Yeah.
and basically, he everywhere we went, he was there. And I raised my concerns to Dennis and Richard Poxon and said, "Dennis, this is nothing to do with me, but I'm going to say it anyhow. We need to get Ricky tied down on a contract, or he's going to be offered so much money he
Yeah.
can't resist." And I thought, and I'll go forward a few months when Ricky fought Castillo.
Yeah.
I went up and hugged Dennis in the ring and said, "We've arrived in big time boxing, Dennis."
Yeah.
Forgetting that when I took Ricky back to the dressing room, his phone went, and it was Oscar De La Hoya on the phone.
Yeah.
So I'm not criticising Ricky, Ray, Hatton, or anyone about Ricky's career. It was just a simple fact that Golden Boy smoozed Ricky and offered him millions more than what Dennis could.
Yeah.
And it's weird when you're on such a high. And as I said, I jumped in the ring and gave Dennis a hug and said, "We've arrived in big time boxing." I forgot. No sooner I got back to the changing room, we'd lost him.
It was the end of the run. Just like to
Yeah.
say thanks, Chinwag Spurs, who says, I just subscribed, just came across this channel and appreciate the tribute. Thank you. No problem, mate. I hope you enjoy the content going forward. I have had a little break in actual fact. Oh yeah, there's somebody else. Concausa. This channel is objective boxing analysis at its finest. Really appreciate that. I've slept on this gig recently for weeks. I know you were very keen, Spud, when you first came on. You were trying to get the ball by the horns, and say let's do this, and I'll come on some more. I'm going to hold my hands up, but this has nothing to do with what we're talking about. And we'll get back to it in a minute. But I met a new lady 7 months ago, or got with a new lady, shall we say? And I ended up prioritizing date nights on Sundays and Fridays instead of my work, on YouTube or the podcast. But yeah, so talking of the Castillo fight, by the way, just in boxing terms, I remember Bo Arum, because obviously that was that crippling body shot, the fourth round, that he took Jose Luis Castillo, who was an elite fighter, out with. And I remember Bo Arum saying, in all my years in boxing, in nearly 50 years of boxing, as it probably stood at the time, he said, I've seen that shot thrown perfectly about 3 or 4 times in my life. And that was one of them. That lead hook to the floating rib.
As soon as it landed, I jumped in the ring,
Yeah,
knowing that the fight was
it was
over.
over. Yeah, it was. And I mean, I like to think I put Ricky in perspective. His legacy. I don't. I mean, I've seen some things and some sweeping statements in the last week or so, and I think they're forgivable and they're survivable because people are emotional and all the rest of it. Whereas, but regardless of any need to put a fighter's genuine boxing legacy and ability and achievements in some kind of perspective to their popularity and commercial reach, I still must admit that when I'm looking at fights back recently, when you see Ricky Hatton footage has been doing the rounds this week,
Yeah.
he was some phenomenal, ferocious force, and his body punching, his aggression, and his pace, and his use of angles. I mean, I think very few fighters did angles really well. Mike Tyson did. Vasyl Lomachenko, recently retired, did. Orlando Canizales did them wonderfully well. Was kind of underrated, but also Ricky Hatton. As a trainer, if you were teaching angles and shifts and pivots, whatever you want to call it, where people get to the side of a man and work their, find their vulnerabilities where they're not expecting the attack to come from, I think Ricky Hatton was up there with the best exponents of the shifts and the pivots and the angles. So he was special. It's a shame. I do suspect. I remember Jose Torres once saying that most fighters he knew who became world champions, he said they seldom improved after they won the world title. If anything, there was either a steady or a more radical decline after they won the world title. I
I
think Ricky probably is a case in point.
I honestly truly believe what I'm about to say, Ben, and I'm interested the number of readers whether they agree with what I'm about to say. Ricky Hatton, after him and Billy Graham split, was never the same again. He was a lot poorer fighter, in my opinion. And I'll give you another example. George Groves was never the same fighter, although he had some mighty good fights, was never the same fighter when Adam Booth
Yeah,
and him
yeah,
departed ways. And if there's one thing I cannot stand about fighters, and this is where a lot of your readers will probably disagree with me, is they change trainers too quickly. And my attitude is, what's wrong with the trainer that got you to world title
yeah,
recognition in the first place? Okay, you might not have won that world title, and there's trainers that have trained fighters with a number of world title fights up for grabs. why blame the trainer? I just don't get it.
Well, it's interesting, and I'd like to talk a little bit about that Billy Graham syndrome. But before I do, I just think I should read you this comment from Ralph O'Neill, who says, "Nice seeing you, looking good and communicating well, Spud. Regards from North Cyprus." So there's a
Thanks,
little.
Rhino.
But yeah, and Chinwag Spurs also, for want of another name, because that's what the account's called. I must refer to presumably the gentleman as Chinwag Spurs. He says, couldn't agree more, Spud. Now, Billy Graham, you see, I believe whatever else was going on, and I don't know. I think that because Billy had taken so much out of his body doing all that training with Ricky, he was a very hands-on physical trainer, and they'd famously do that 12 rounds on the body belt in the final run up to Ricky's championship fights. Apparently, Billy Graham said his body was fucked from doing all those pads
No, it was.
and the body belt. And I think they were starting to feel that he was the kind of relationship he had with Ricky. It wasn't like an Angelo Dundee or Eddie Futch just whispering in his ear like a guru. He needed to be physically up to the job because that's the chemistry they had. And
Yeah,
I think Lee Beard, a young Manchester trainer
I
at the
know him
time,
very
ended up
well.
doing, and he seems like a good guy. Was doing Ricky's pads for him, and then I think it was enough. I think Billy's physical ailments became whatever leverage was needed for Ricky to move away and decide that maybe he could do better with a. We know it didn't work out well with Floyd Mayweather Senior. There doesn't seem to be a lot of chemistry there. He was doing a lot of Mayweather flashy pad work with Floyd Senior, wasn't he? But ultimately, he got the wins against Lascano and Paul Malignaggi. But we know what happened with the Manny Pacquiao fight next time out after he had those two comeback wins, So, I mean, I do think Billy Graham was. It's a shame in it, as close as you are with somebody, and you say and you probably feel emotionally like after the Kostya fight that they'd be brothers and bonded forever, and they would never part professionally. Things do change, don't they? And things do creep in, and that seems to be the case.
I remember distinctly speaking to Billy about the split with Ricky, and the one thing I'll say, Billy was absolutely distraught about it,
Yeah.
and I just feel for Billy Graham. I really feel for him. He's just. I honestly think. I'll put another question. Did you think he would beat before the fight? Did you think Ricky Hatton would beat Manny Pacquiao or Floyd Mayweather?
I didn't think he beat Floyd Mayweather. I did not think that. I was confident that Mayweather would win. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to hold my hands up, Spud. I did think he had a shout against Pacquiao at the time. And
I didn't give him a prayer.
no, well, you were savvier than me because I said I let myself believe that at 140 Hatton had a decent shout. And I thought, yeah, maybe, this will be competitive. And I sort of quietly fancy Ricky, but you know what happened. And it's one of those views. I remember once thinking O'Hara Davies had some sort of decent shouts against Josh Taylor, which I look at it now and I think, well, you keep learning in boxing, and I'm wiser now than I was in 2009 on the whole ins and outs of it. So yeah, I must admit, I gave him a shout against Pacquiao. There's a comment here from an account that says, did his father not want Billy Graham out of the picture? Not blaming anyone or trying to, just thinking back to the documentary. I may be wrong. I love the two together, and he wasn't the same without Billy. I got to say, and move not just about the Billy Graham situation. Obviously, there was controversy surrounding Ricky's relationship with his parents. They fell out in 2012. They patched it up in 2019, and tragically, sadly, I believe they were not on good terms in the last 2 years, but just leading up to his passing. But I've seen people try to mention it on my posts over the last week. I don't want to. It's way beyond me to talk about that relationship and what went on with the dad and all the rest of it. I have no
There was.
idea.
I'll
An
be a liar,
individual.
Ben. I'll be a liar, Ben, to say I didn't notice some tension. Of course, I did. And anything I ever noticed, I reported back to Dennis.
Yeah,
And said, Dennis, you need to be aware, in my opinion,
yeah,
there's a bit of tension in the camp at the moment. And Dennis, on the result of that, Dennis always used to get in his car and go down to Manchester to see Ricky.
Yeah.
But the one thing I will say 110% is that Ray Hatton and Carol Hatton and the family absolutely dotted over Ricky and loved him. They couldn't have loved him more.
Yeah.
And it goes without saying, if I had to give ground, if that's the right terminology, about Ricky Hatton's life, is everyone makes mistakes.
Yeah.
And, like, for instance, me and my son don't get on.
Yeah.
But so in the outside world, we get on and I love him to bits. But when a father, biggest mistake is telling his headstrong son what to do and how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're going to do it their way. And the
Yeah.
biggest lesson I've ever learned in life is just let me get on with it. And my wife always used to say to me, I know you love him, but you're going to have to let him make his own mind up. And I always used to say, but he's going to end up doing this, he's going to end up doing that. My wife's sensible advice was, we'll be there to pick up the pieces.
Yeah. And
It's,
sometimes you have to step away as hard as it is, because I mean the trouble. Presumably, you look back at yourself in years when you were more naive or more headstrong, or less knowledgeable about things,
I
and
was
there
shocking
was,
then.
but there was no telling us, was there? There was no telling me anything when I was 21. Nothing.
I remember me and you, and we mentioned it on the last podcast,
Yeah.
falling out.
That was our opening thing. I mean, basically, I'd never heard of you until I got an email, not an email, an inbox saying, "Hello, Ben. My name is Spud Woollatt, David Hayes' online press officer. Very interested in your comments about, your recent article about David, and I'll certainly be telling your editor that we'd be denied any interview in the future." And I was like, straight away. But that was your protective guard dog mindset towards doing a job for someone. You're fiercely loyal, and if you were representing somebody, you were on anybody you thought was disrespecting them online like a harbour shark, because that's what you were supposed to do. But I'm a big fan of reconciliation. So one of my favourite things is to talk to people who I initially got off on the wrong foot with and become fond of them, and to establish a good relationship with them. And you're a case in point there.
I'm totally glad that we made up, Ben. And I'll be honest with you, that I will mention that's the difference between Ricky Hatton and David Hay.
Yes, yes.
Ricky was more approachable, whereas David used to say to me, "What the fuck are you on about, Spud?" And totally discounted what I had to say. Whereas Ricky always listened.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example, slightly amusing. Before the Urango fight, whenever I looked after Ricky, I used to recce everywhere we went prior to actually doing that thing. And I knew where Ricky was going to be held in the changing room on the second floor of the
Yeah.
Paris. And I remember walking down and there being absolutely no security whatsoever at the weighing venue. Also, the weighing venue had a shitty little stage. Hello, Spencer.
How you doing, my friend?
Had a shitty little stage, and I said to Dennis, "I've spoke to the casino management and said that the location of this weigh-in has got to change. Do you realise there's going to be 5 to 10,000 Brits turning up, pissed, and wanting to see their hero?" And no one believed what I had to say until Dennis came down and had heart failure and said the location's got to change. But the casino put their foot down and said the weigh-in for the Wang Yurango fight is not changing. So I remember briefing Ricky, and Ricky said, "You must be exaggerating." I said, "They're on the tables, Ricky. The fans are on the roulette tables and all sorts, trying to gain some view of what's going on." And I remember it was time for us to go. and I persuaded a couple of other members of the team to look after Ricky with me. And when we went down the stairs, all Ricky said to me was, "Fucking hell, Spud." I said, "I told you."
Yeah.
It was absolutely manic, and it was the way things were going to go for all future Ricky Hatton fights. They were going to be inundated with the over enthusiastic fans. It was just unbelievable.
Just like to welcome Spencer The Knowledge Fearon to this broadcast. Spencer, it's been speculated that Ricky was perhaps the most popular British boxer in history, perhaps even more so than Henry Cooper or Frank Bruno. I mean, obviously different eras, terrestrial television versus satellite TV. Do you have a view on that?
Do I have
A view on that about the level of popularity compared to even the likes of Cooper and Bruno?
It's kind of difficult to gauge because I'd rather say like of his era he was very, very popular. It's difficult to gauge, but it's kind of different because Henry Cooper and Frank Bruno are both London-based guys. We have a
Yeah.
little bias towards it because it's London and it's the capital. But to be fair, what Ricky Hatton done the night that he fought Floyd Mayweather when he brought over 25,000 people, right, out to the MGM, nobody could say anything about his popularity. He was definitely up there. Do you remember when he fought Juan Lascano after losing to Floyd?
Yes, the Hispanic causing panic at Manchester
Yeah,
Arena.
right.
Yeah.
And Spud can remember clearly. What did he have at that? Was it 60,000 he had there?
60,000, so to say. I
Sorry,
think
was
it was
that a
near
football ground?
55.
Oh
Was
yeah,
it a
Old
football
Trafford.
ground?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Main Road,
yeah,
Etihad Stadium, wasn't it?
yeah. Ridiculous. So when we look at the things or like how popular Ricky Hatton was, I mean it's difficult to gauge. What I do know is that Frank Bruno was on terrestrial TV, so it's kind of difficult to gauge. Like, and also I'm going to keep this thing totally 100. Frank Bruno was a black man being that big,
Yeah.
and for a black man to be called Britain's favorite son, that takes some going. But Ricky Hatton was definitely up there, man, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
definitely agree with you there.
Yeah.
I mean, Spencer, we were just talking about the fact that there's probably a sense that when you look at when he beat Kostya, which most people would agree that was his finest hour and probably the best, when people talk about their best night when everything was all clicking for them and firing on all cylinders, it's probably true to say that he probably declined a little bit more, perhaps more quickly than he ideally would have done. And perhaps one might hope, a bit like Barry McGuigan, he could have retained that longevity at the absolute top a little bit longer. I mentioned earlier before you came on that Jose Torres once said that most fighters who became world champions didn't improve after they won the title, and if anything, they either plateaued or declined. I mean, do you feel that Ricky perhaps could have been around for longer if things had been slightly different in various
Well,
aspects?
I do remember because ringside at it was at ringside.
That was a what
Corrales was ringside.
Say again, what?
No, when he fought Costa Zoo.
Yeah.
When he fought Costa Zoo, Diego Corrales was ringside.
Yes. Can I just
remember
interject
that?
there?
Go on.
That's very true. And word was within the team that Ricky would face Diego Corrales in the
And he would
fight.
have beaten him. Ricky Hatton would have beaten him, mate.
And the fight didn't happen, sadly, because
He
Diego
died.
Corrales died in the motorbike accident.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I remember we invited Diego Corrales' wife to the Castillo fight.
I remember that.
Yeah.
And Ricky, like, she came into the ring. I remember that. And this is the thing. It's like, what was that? That was 205 when he beat Costa Zoo.
Was June the 4th, 2005.
I know it was June the 4th. Reason why, because I was on Bill. That was the day I came out on Bill, and
God, those are the days.
Danny Williams was on the undercard, right?
Yeah,
And Danny put up £500,000 for my Bell money, right?
I remember. Yeah. Well,
And and I got Bell, and my Bell conditions was that I was meant to sleep at home every night.
yeah.
But Ricky was fighting and Danny was fighting. I said, I'm not missing Danny Williams' fight because of what he done. And I remember my mate Bilal picked me up and we drove to Manchester 5 hours, and then we drove back after the fight, and then we drove back. And the atmosphere, or what you was witnessing, it was something incredible. It was incredible. It was incredible because Costa, even though he's getting long in the tooth, but he was still a monster.
Yes, and he was still the man, but by virtue of beating him, Ricky became the legitimate light welterweight champion of the world, definitely.
Exactly, and yeah, that was one hell of a fight. And I think there was a lot of pressure put on Ricky Hatton as well. Because I remember, there was a lot of pressure put on him because I remember after that, he ventured out to America for the WBA welterweight crown, right, against Luis Castillo. Luis Collazo.
Luis Collazo.
He lost that fight, in my opinion. Even though I was member of the team, in my opinion, Ricky Hatton lost that Collazo fight.
Very, very close.
You know what? I'm going to go back and watch that fight because I remember, because I just started at City Boxer then, the place where I met Ben Doughty. And I remember watching that fight and I thought, and a lot of people were on him because, he just left Frank Warren, didn't he? At that time.
Yeah, and you know what Warren did? He did
a smear campaign
with the MEN the next day, so Ricky couldn't box at his favourite arena.
There was all sorts of problems.
Yeah.
For instance, I can't remember his name, but he's a Ukrainian fighter or something like that fought Amir Khan that Ricky was going to fight, and then he signed
Andreas Kotelnik.
Kotelnik.
And I believe he signed around some form of contract with Frank Warren, which meant negotiations weren't going to go smoothly, which is why they subsequently picked the Collazo fight in America. And I always remember thinking, we were all sat around this table. I didn't actually go to that fight. And I remember them saying, Spud, how you scored the fight? I said, Ricky, this is going to be a split decision, and Ricky's losing the fight by 2-3 rounds, in my opinion. And I was shouted down and told not to be so ridiculous. And I said, I'm going to say it how it is. Ricky Hatton lost that fight.
Yes.
And that's why there were certain misgivings when he fought Urango, because you've already alluded to it, Ben, that Urango was a tough.
So strong.
And the one thing that's not come out, or I don't think's ever come out of that fight, is Urango constantly complained with his team that he had the flu and he didn't want the fight.
Yeah.
And he was told basically he's earning too much money to withdraw.
Well, that's life, man.
Well, I believe Ricky had a problem as well, because at one point, wasn't Billy Graham alluding to some sort of degree of panic in the corner, saying, "Are you okay? Have you got it in you? Can you get through it?"
Yeah.
Or something like that. And I believe Ricky might have been fighting some cold or something, and he was a bit worried about his cardio.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah. But the thing with the Collazo fight, one of the things I think was an issue for Ricky was they said he entered the ring at 160, which, because when he'd fight at 140, he'd probably be about, I think they said he'd be about 155 in the rings a lot of the time. He gained 15 pounds, but what it was suggested was just because he was weighing in at 147 instead of 140, he should have still came in at the same on the night weight that he always did. But he came in half a stone heavier than he
he was very sluggish in that fight. He was very, very sluggish in that.
Do you know what I mean? Exactly,
One thing while it's on my mind, and forgive me, Spencer, I want to mention something that I find truly and utterly disgusting, is Chris Eubank Jr.'s behaviour at the weigh-in, not the weigh-in, the
Well,
press conference yesterday.
we were there, weren't we, Spence?
Yeah.
It
That
was actually on Wednesday.
whilst I agree, Eddie was on a wind-up and he was doing everything he could to wind
Mhm.
Chris Eubank up. I cannot understand why Chris Eubank didn't shut his mouth when Eddie said, let's
Can I speak
pay
about
honour
money?
to Ricky Hatton.
You know
It's
what?
the most distasteful, disgusting behaviour I've seen for a long, long time.
You know what? I agree with you, Spud, to a degree, yeah. But this, what I'm saying is this, and it's not for me to take sides because I'm not taking sides. But I'm just saying this. On Boxing King Media, Chris Eubank Jr. does a really nice tribute to Ricky Hatton. And I think at the moment, when he was saying, I don't want to hear nothing from Eddie Hearn, maybe it was Eddie Hearn's intention to say he wanted to say something about Ricky Hatton, or maybe it wasn't, yeah? But we were there, and they did play a tribute to Ricky Hatton and everything else. And Eddie turned around saying, like, he wanted to say his piece. It was when he said, oh, Eddie Hearn interjected when Eubank was talking, like, Eubank was switched, said, listen, I don't want to hear nothing out your mouth. And to Eddie Hearn's credit, he was saying, well, look, I want to say something about Ricky Hatton. And if you know anything about the Eubanks, they're very hard-headed. They're saying, listen, I don't want to hear nothing out your mouth because this is not your time. So I make him right, to tell you the honest truth.
But I'll be honest with you, Spencer, to come back at you, that's very good reason, argument that you just made. But to
Yeah.
come back at that is, I thought another distasteful situation was when Eddie stood back and let Anthony Joshua disrespect
Lennox Lewis.
Usyk with the bout situation.
Yeah, but you know
Yeah.
what? This how it goes is this. It's like, what was that? That's 3 years ago now, right? 4 years ago. 4 years
Sorry,
ago.
you don't have to say the date. Your reputation's intact. Just say what you're going
Thank
to
you
say.
very much. No. I'm saying it was, for me to make excuses for Anthony Joshua is this. Anthony Joshua, unfortunately, is still living in a bubble, right? He's still living in a bubble.
Yeah, I
As you know,
agree.
Spud, you've been around loads of fighters, Spud. You've been around loads of fighters. You've been around loads. And when you're at the top, or you're at this, you got this perception that you're at this top place, and things go wrong, and there's no one really there to tell you something because everybody's kissing your ass, right? So, and they kiss your ass so much they're choking on shit. So when they do try to talk to you, shit's spilling out. It's your own shit that's coming back on you. Certain people don't know how to handle those situations. Now, obviously, the Anthony Joshua, when he exploded and erupted at the end against Usyk, to decency, we're gonna say, well, that was wrong. He should have said that. He should let him have his piece, and it was wrong. But unfortunately, that's more of a reflection of his camp, of his trainer. Could you imagine Jimmy Tibbs being in Anthony's corner at that time, and he wanted to go on a rant like that? It would have been stopped, right?
Absolutely,
But
100% agreed.
but but I'm going to call this right. You had, what's the kid's name? Fernandez, right?
Angel Fernandez.
Right, Devil Fernandez, and who else was in there? What's the Hispanic brother who was in his corner as well?
That was Robert Garcia, wasn't it?
Right, and Robert Garcia. Robert
Yeah.
Garcia didn't have no direct contact to Anthony Joshua. He didn't even have Anthony Joshua's phone number. He had to go through Angel Fernandez because they're so frightened of losing their job. Now, when
Yeah.
you're confident,
I can concur with you there, Spencer, because I had a very similar job with David Hay,
okay,
that nobody was allowed to get near David Hay. And if
right,
he gave the signal like scratch his head or something like that, that meant whoever he was talking to needed to be moved on.
okay.
Yeah.
So, and what I'm saying is this: those things can't happen to me. Definitely couldn't happen to Ben. Couldn't happen to me. That's why I get loads of fighters begging me to work with him. But I'm not a my boy. I'm not a bag carrier. I don't do that shit. Sorry, I'm not, I rate myself. You don't have to rate me, but I rate myself. So
That's why Tony Burns said he wasn't interested in training Audley Harrison when he turned pro. To
exactly.
coach Tony Burns, he said I've kicked him out of this gym 3 times while he's been here, and that is the way I like it. He said I'm not having Tony get me this, get me that. You know.
Yeah, right.
I,
So sorry to cut you there, Spud, right? So as much as you found that distasteful with the belts and all the rest of it, when you're dealing with a spiritual human like Alexander Usyk, I believe that he understood, like, have your little, you know what I mean, I beat you. So that is it. And that's what it was. Like, he threw his toys out in the pram. And I think after it, it's something that he'll regret, but at least he's got it off of his chest.
but Spencer,
But it's more to do with the bitches that are around him because they didn't have the balls to say, yo, bro.
I completely agree with you. Throughout my life, I've got in trouble because I've opened my mouth and said what I feel, and it's got me into an awful lot of trouble.
I think that's the story of all of us on this channel
I was
right
going to
now.
say, has that ever happened to you, Spence? Do you know what? It's literally a year ago since he said the things about the Bois camp and all that. It was a year ago today, more or less, when that went viral and Warren and Hearn were talking about it and all the rest. Because Spencer went, when he said, can't no EDL man tell me nothing, tell Froch to blah, blah, blah. That was like a year ago, Spence.
I remember my job, one of my many jobs with David was I had to get David to training on time. And this is way after he won his world title. And I lost count the amount of bollockings I got
From who?
when Adam said, "Where's David?"
Tell Adam Booth to suck out, bro.
And I used to say to Adam, David's in his room. And David would have a guest in his room.
Yeah.
And I'll say no more than that.
Yeah.
And in the end, I got quite emotional with David and said, I'm sick to death of this training camp that I'm constantly getting bollocked for you being late for training. Can you turn up on time, please, David? And I was basically discounted and told to shut up. And
By who?
David.
Well,
Yeah.
so, but like I'm saying, you see that, and that's why they don't get real people. You think they could have had me in that camp, and like you're telling me to shut up? Are you nuts?
I remember, Spencer, let's get controversial now. I remember how much of a threat you were to certain people within that camp.
Yeah.
And let's go no further than that, other than to say, I was called over by the operations manager at the time and told Spencer Fearon is not allowed in this gym. And I remember coming up to you saying, I'm really sorry, Spence, but you're going to have to leave. And it was the most uncomfortable situation that I've been in, that I had to tell somebody that I admired.
Yeah, but Spud, if you remember, I didn't leave.
No, I know you didn't.
Right?
And I got a bollocking for it.
Right, yeah, right. But listen to me. I'm just trying to say to you, like, boxing is, and I'm glad that you said that because I know anyway. But what I also realize is like how insecure people are in boxing. You know why? Because a lot of them are frauds and con artists, right? And when you and what will happen is, the spirit of God that's inside me will interrupt the devil that's inside those people, right? So, and this has been the story of my life, simply because of their insecurities. And the thing about it is this: inside boxing is very bullshitty. Like everyone's smiling and nod like we're all mates. They're not all mates. You're all devils. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's why I'm comfortable within my own skin. And their lives is different.
I completely concur with you. For instance, I'll make another sweeping statement. There's uncountable trainers knew what their boxers took whilst they're in training.
Yeah.
But never said anything.
Innumerable.
Come
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Come on. Come on.
And
But it's
go
quite
on.
interesting. because we began and we will finish with a tribute, a heartfelt tribute to Ricky Hatton, but inevitably it's almost like we're just naturally ambling along with the flow of the conversation. We've encountered the stories of all the skullduggery and subterfuge of the professional boxing industry. Regardless of that, I think it is still hard to believe that Ricky isn't here anymore. It was like I say, famous fighters of note, the great and good, die all the time, but there was something very personal about the impact of Ricky's passing, which I don't normally
Absolutely.
feel. And it wasn't because I hero worshipped him to any extent at all. Because I must admit, I don't hero worship anybody
Except
younger
for
than me.
Muhammad
But
Ali.
no, I said younger. I was about to say I don't hero worship anybody younger than me. I've got two heroes, is Muhammad Ali and Sugar Ray Leonard. But there was something very personal about Ricky's passing. Partly, I think, partly because I'd met him several times and interviewed him, and I feel like I was privy to an extent to some of that sadness. I know that there's been no cause of death announced and all that, and everybody's treading around that particular thing. But whilst alluding to mental health narrative and be kind and make sure you check in on your friends and all the rest of it. But I mean, I don't know about you, gentlemen, but I felt I could see that sadness and the fact that for all he was the life and soul, and he was the man of the people, and he was a banterer and a one-line merchant. I could see sometimes that he wasn't really comfortable sometimes with the attention that engulfed him all the time, and he was going through things. You know what I mean?
Yeah. What I'll say is Ricky quickly established that when I was around him, we could have some really good banter. And I'll be honest with you, with all these boxing forums that I read, some of the distasteful comments that you see on there, I prefer to remember Ricky Hatton as a thoroughly decent individual who made good for himself, and he's earned millions through the fight game in the shall I say, corrupt
Yes.
sport called boxing.
Yeah. And it is, unfortunately, that's the thing. I think it is the Wild West of sports, or the red light district of sports, as Thomas Hauser referred to it as. I do think, to an extent, Spencer, though, that's why we love it as well, because I think, to be honest, the other sports, the flavour that I gather from other sports like tennis or rugby, they all seem a bit squeaky clean and mainstream to me. I mean, I know you get corruption and match fixing allegations in other sports sometimes, but boxing is so consistently, endlessly fascinating and seedy. I think that's partly why I love it, for all the skullduggery and the skullduggers. Don't know about you.
One of the biggest reasons why I work for so many promoters is, for whatever reason, I could sell a ticket.
Yeah.
And I had very, very good contacts within the army. For example, I'm under no illusion that for one fight, I sold 450 tickets. And I was like the promoter's best mate. And
Yeah.
my friends used to say to me, "You're only there because you sell the tickets. Believe me, you'd be out on your ass the moment you don't sell a ticket in the fight. In the fight."
What
And
an
sure
asset
enough,
you'd have been, though, because if I had a young fighter who couldn't shift a ticket, but a friend like you who was able to market them to all your kind of base of the army and stuff, what an asset that'd be to have in your kind of peer group.
make no mistake, until the Enzo Maccanelli fight, David couldn't sell out a phone box.
Yeah.
Well, he didn't do too good in his next fight when he fought Monty Barrett, did he?
Oh, that was funny, wasn't it? I remember Monty Barrett running to the ring and tripping over
Dropping,
the...
over the rope, yeah.
Was that at the O2?
That was
Yeah.
at the O2.
Yeah.
But they didn't sell it out. They did dismal.
But going back to Ricky, I miss him terribly, because every now and again he used to ring me up, a bit like Clinton Woods always rings me up, saying, "How you doing, Spud?" And I'll give Ricky his due. As soon as he found out that I had Parkinson's, he'd ring me up and have a bit of banter with me.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, I'll never, ever forget that, because he didn't have to do that. And my final words on Ricky is I loved him to bits.
I think that's a good with the little one in the background as well. I think that's a good position to
This one
finish this
thing,
one on.
please, can I appear on another podcast with Spencer Fearon and Ben Doughty on, please?
Yeah, so I think you've
Because
Of
done
course
really
you can.
good
I'd
today.
love to,
Because
mate.
Spencer, he's done really well today because obviously he's battling the illness, and I think the way he's kept up this constant flow has been fantastic. You know,
Mate, listen, it's multineural, it's not mental. So I mean, he's as sharp as a tax bud.
also,
thank you.
Concao, you've asked before, by the way, Concao, about how you can contact me. Contact me on Facebook or Instagram, or Facebook or Instagram is fine. Real Ben Doughty on Instagram, just plain Ben Doughty on Facebook. Get on
No,
that and send me an inbox.
on Instagram. It's big titty Doughty.
Yeah. Well, it's just that's my other account. Failing that,
Yeah.
if you're able to take this down quickly, Concao, Ben Doughty 2000 at yahoo.co.uk. Listen, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. And thank you, Spud, for galvanizing me into renewing these live podcasts. This has been the first one for a couple of months now, and I pledge to be better in future. Ricky Hatton, an absolute legend, an inherently
Absolutely.
decent soul, working class hero. I wish he was still here. Glad you two are still here. In the meantime, be lucky. Keep punching.
See you later,
Lucky,
Spencer.
mate.
See you later.